So our next storyteller is Orlando Pineda, and he is currently a computer programmer. He codes for good at a nonprofit startup and helps others in need by developing innovative technologies that challenge poverty. Orlando earned a BS in computer science from Columbia University in New York, which is where Francisco went as well, and they discovered that when we all met, from the School of Engineering. Outside of work, Orlando enjoys going on hikes with his dog, Nata, and he owns and has seen every, another pronunciation. Francisco is going to do these. He owns and has seen every Studio Ghibli film. What is that? And hopes to continue this trend with any future releases. So he has never performed in front. I mean, this is a coder, so give him all the warmth in your hearts, because he's a brave coder.
Hi, everyone. I think I'm just going to jump right in. So it was my sophomore year at Columbia University, and I was struggling. I knew college would be difficult, but I never thought I would go that many nights without sleep. I mean, why should I struggle this hard when my future was in chains? Why was my future in chains? Well, I was undocumented. I was an undocumented student attending one of the most prestigious universities in the world, which meant that come graduation, despite having a fancy and expensive degree, I wouldn't be able to do anything with it. As time passed and graduation came closer, it became harder and harder to convince myself that this was all worth it. That is, until something amazing happened. The DREAM Act was up for vote in the Senate, an act that would unchain my future and provide me with a path towards citizenship. Obviously, I became excited. I began to dream and fantasize about all the things I would do once the DREAM Act was in place. I would get my first job in my field of study. I would buy and drive my first car. I would be able to go home and visit my family for the first time in Mexico. The possibilities seemed endless. In hindsight, I should have known not to get too excited. I guess, in my mind, it was a no-brainer. They had to pass the DREAM Act. How could they not? How could they destroy the dreams and futures of me and my family? But they did just that. They destroyed it. Everything. The cloud I had been dreaming on suddenly faded. And as they let the DREAM Act die in the Senate, so had my dreams. I came crashing back to earth, back to reality. But as I fell, instead of landing back on the surface to normality, it broke. I broke. And when I landed, it was pitch black. Things shouldn't have been different. Things were just like before, right? But they weren't. I wasn't. Light wasn't penetrating this far. I was in a dark place, a place I would spend the next long years of my life in. In my culture, we don't really acknowledge depression. But from what I know now, this is exactly where I had landed. My grades dropped. My motivation dropped. I suddenly became a hermit-like robot that would hide from the world. I suddenly became a hermit-like robot that would only do the minimum in school, social, and work. I suddenly became a hermit-like robot that would hide from the world in shame at every opportunity. Shame. I felt unwanted, like I didn't belong there, or anywhere else in this country. It brought back thoughts and experiences that I had when first arriving to college. Thoughts and experiences that I had kind of shoved off when they happened. But looking at them in this new state of darkness caused me great pain and nurtured the flames of negativity in which I was burning. It became immediately apparent that I was different from a lot of the student body when I first arrived to Columbia. During orientation, we were asked about what we did that past summer. I stared in awe and amazement as these students described vacations and trips to parts of the world that I could only dream of visiting. In hindsight, it might have just been my mind romanticizing what these trips were really like. But in that moment, these people's horizon seemed so broadened that I felt belittled saying that I had spent the summer on campus, something that I thought was really cool. I remember a time when I got made fun of for the clothes I was wearing. I walked into the late night basement cafeteria and ran into some acquaintances from some of my classes. "Panda, what the hell are you wearing?" I just shrugged and didn't answer because I really didn't know how. I was wearing the same clothes I had worn throughout all of high school, which I had no problem with, but apparently to these individuals, they were subpar. At the time, it didn't affect me, but these memories in new darkness brought me great pain. I realized my reality was different during a conversation I had with the people on my dorm. The floor I lived on the first 2 years at Columbia was a floor full of engineering majors. Since we were all in engineering, we all had these really expensive books we all needed to buy, and we often complained about that to one another. Since my scholarship program enabled me to check out these books long term, I felt proud and wanted to share this with them. But when they asked what program that was, I told them that I had a scholarship that covered everything from books to flights. One of the older students responded with, "You realize my parents are paying for your tuition?" Confused, I asked, "How does that work?" He proudly responded, "Both my parents are paying for my tuition in full." "Great," I responded, at a loss for words. The only reason I was in this program was because my parents couldn't contribute anything towards my tuition. Through sheer merit and necessity, I had obtained an incredible scholarship, one that I will always be grateful for. But in that moment, I felt like a second-rate student, handicapped by my socioeconomic background. I never brought up the fact that I was in that program ever again. And so I continued to live in this darkness, even past graduation, even after the arrival of DACA, which would finally allow me to do two things I've always wanted to do: drive and work. Naturally, my family began to worry about me. My mom justified this robotic state as me recovering from the difficulties of school, but I could tell that she was worried. The turning point was when I was sitting in the office of my high school's alumni coordinator. She looked at me with a sense of worry and bewilderment. "Your degree is starting to stale. I don't understand. Are you actually trying?" No, I wasn't. In that state, I wasn't exactly knocking down doors to get the interviews and do my best to excel in them. Every company I applied to was the same, and as the rejection letters started to accumulate, it became harder and harder to motivate myself to even try to reach out. That was until she sent me an opening for a software engineer at a nonprofit tech startup. "Huh, that's different," I thought to myself. I applied, and to my surprise, I got an interview. I decided to give it one last shot and summon the last drops of motivation to prepare for the barrage of interviews that were to come. 3 interviews later, I had done it. I made it all the way to the last round, in which I would speak to the CEO of the company. He started the conversation with, "Let me tell you my story about why I started One Degree. You see, I grew up undocumented." Huh. I couldn't stop myself and blurted out, "Really?" A spark. I had a mini freak out inside of my head. Did that come out as weird? Did he think I was judging him for being undocumented? I wish I could have seen the look on his face, on my face. Oh, how ironic it would have been to come this far and fail for reacting like that. As he continued his story, I felt different. I didn't know what it was. That spark. Something had ignited. And all of a sudden, I had this insatiable urge to tell this person that I was undocumented too. Something that I had never felt before in my life. And so I told him, and it was amazing. For that brief moment, I was my old self again. The rest of the interview was a blur, but I ended up getting the job. But I didn't just get a job. I gained so much more. I left with a spark, a ray of light that would lead me out of that darkness. And as I finally stepped out of that darkness and realized something that I should have realized all along, which was that there should be no shame in one's struggle. In fact, it should be a source of strength, a source of pride. As undocumented people, we have to work so much harder to even reach the surface that everyone else is already standing on from birth. Through merit and tenacity and the help of our champions, we are capable of accomplishing amazing feats, such as graduating from Columbia and even becoming a software engineer. And with today's broken and unforgiving political climate, there are many, myself included, who are being targeted and are vulnerable, in danger of falling to that dark place where I once lived, or worse. And we simply cannot let that happen. Thank you.